In the year 2009, in Plainville, Connecticut, a 25-year-old university student, Tiana Notice, discovered that her 29-year-old boyfriend, James Carter, too had a criminal record of assaulting women. She also discovered that he was a chronic liar and that he had lied to her about all aspects of his life. Besides that, he was also cheating on her with another woman, and he had 2 children outside their relationship. So she broke up with him. Unfortunately, James Carter refused to let her go, so he began harassing and stalking her wherever she went. Tiana went to the police station and filed a restraining order against James, but he still continued harassing and stalking her. He consistently sent her threatening messages, so she went back to the police to seek protection against him. And she showed the officers his messages. However, the police refused to help her. They told her that those messages were not threats. Tiana's life was in great danger, so she went to 3 different police stations 33 times seeking help, but they all refused to help her. They told her that James was not a threat. Unfortunately, on 14th February 2009, which was on a Valentine's Day, James drove to Tiana's apartment and murdered her. Tiana's murder could have been prevented, but the police failed her. She went to the police station 33 times seeking help, but they didn't take her seriously. This is the story of Tiana Notice. Tiana Angelique Notice was born on February 4th, 1984 in Worcester, Massachusetts, but she grew up in Connecticut. Her father was known as Alvin Notice, and he worked as a deputy superintendent at the Massachusetts Department of Corrections. Tiana's mother was known as Kathy Lewis. Tiana had 3 brothers who were known as Tyrone, Tyrell, and Christian. Unfortunately, her parents separated and her father married a woman named Veronica, who became her stepmother. Tiana later had a stepsister known as Natasha Smith. Tiana was a very artistic child. At the age of 6 years old, she had already had a passion for music. She would spend much of her time writing her own songs and poetry. She also loved spending her time in choirs and singing groups. To her, the most important things in her life were God, family, and friends. She was good at debating. Therefore, her mother knew that she would become a lawyer when she joins college. Tiana was incredibly bright. They would always move her to 1 class ahead, but she would still become ahead of the class, so they ended up moving her 2 classes ahead. She attended her first year at Fitchburg State College while she was still a senior in high school. And after graduating from high school, she attended the University of Hartford, where she studied bachelor's degree in political science. After her graduation, she enrolled at the same university, and she pursued her master's degree in communications, public policy, and paralegal studies. While at college, she also became an activist and founded chapter of the Roosevelt Institute, which is an on-campus club. It's a campus network, and it strives to help the country move forward toward a more democratic and prosperous future. And its members conduct policy research on the world's most pressing political issues and present their research to policymakers. As a campus leader, she also mentored the chapter's students. In addition, she volunteered at the Campus Women's Center, which promoted things like Eating Disorder Awareness Week and World AIDS Day. As she continued studying, Tiana, who was living in Plainville, Connecticut, also worked part-time as a paralegal, and she was a member of the Legal Review in Connecticut. She spent her time doing pro bono work and helping those who couldn't afford legal services. While in college, she entered into a relationship with a man named Robert Dennis, and the 2 of them started dating. However, after dating for 5 years, Robert confided in Tiana that he was struggling with mental health issues. He therefore needed to return home to Virginia to get better, and also to complete his degree, so the couple agreed to break up for the time being. Tiana was considering pursuing a law degree as well, a PhD, once she graduated with her master's in political science. In the year 2007, Tiana was exploring an online dating site known as MySpace. She met a 29-year-old man named James Carter Sicken. James lived in Bloomfield, Connecticut, where he was working as a limo driver. However, he had a long history of assaulting women. He had been convicted of violent assault against women in the year 2002 in Rhode Island. In the year 2006, he had also violently assaulted his ex-girlfriend in a domestic violence. And the case was ongoing. He was arrested but later freed on bail. Let us go back to the main story. After James and Tiana had met online, they planned to meet in person in a public place on a dinner meal so that they can know more about each other. So they met as planned, and as they were having a conversation, James lied to Tiana that he was a college graduate and he had an executive job working as a manager for Aetna, which is a major insurance company in the Hartford, Connecticut. He also lied to her that he owned his own home and he didn't have any child. James was so nice to Tiana, and this made her to like him so much, even though she was not looking for a serious relationship. Soon they started dating. Their relationship was so perfect at the beginning, and they would even attend church service together. As time went by, James started buying for her gifts. He bought for her a phone and a new car tires for her car. He also paid her bills. Tiana told her mother about her relationship with James, and she even showed her his photos. When her mother heard everything and saw the photos, she immediately didn't like James, even though she had not yet met him in person. After being in a relationship for 6 months, James was arrested by the police and charged with domestic abuse against his former girlfriend. He was then sent to jail. Tiana always went to visit him in jail. During her visit, James lied to her that he was arrested because he was a young black man who was being targeted by the police. Fortunately, Tiana believed him and continued visiting him in prison and writing to him letters. Fortunately, in mid-2008, James was released from prison, and they continued with their relationship. Later on, Tiana met one of James' sons when he came to visit him, and that was when she discovered that James was actually a father of 2 children. She also found out that he didn't own a home, and that the home he claimed belonged to him was actually of his parent. Tiana also found out that James was not a college graduate, as he had earlier on claimed, and he was not also a manager at an insurance company. As if that was not enough, she also learned that he had a long criminal history of assaulting women. So Tiana was devastated after discovering that James had been lying to her about every aspect of his life. She also realized that James had lied to her when he told her that he was in prison because he was a black man who was targeted by the police. Tiana suspected that James was also cheating on her with another woman, therefore she broke up with him towards the end of the year 2008. This was after they had been in a relationship for about a year. Unfortunately, James was not ready to break up with Tiana, so he began harassing her. He started calling, texting, and emailing her repeatedly. Tiana pleaded with him to leave her alone, but he continued harassing her. She tried several weeks to make James stop harassing her, but he did not stop. He continued stalking and following her wherever she went. Surprisingly, after James had been rejected and dumped by Tiana, he went to Plainville police station on January 2009 and filed a restraining order against Tiana. He accused her of assaulting him by punching him in the face. He also claimed that she had kicked his car headlights, thereby vandalizing it. However, when the police investigated his claims, they found no evidence to support them. 4 days later, Tiana also went to Plainville police station and filed a restraining order against James, and the order was granted on January 8, 2009. However, days after the order had been granted, James again started sending a barrage of emails, calls, and texts to Tiana. Tiana was very afraid, and so on. 13th of January 2009, she went back to Plainville police station and reported that James had violated the restraining order. She showed a police officer the messages that James had been sending to her. However, when the officer went through the messages, he told her that those messages were not threats. Therefore, there was nothing they could do. So Tiana went back home without getting help from the police. James continued harassing her, and after he discovered that she had gone to the police station to seek help, he also went to the police station the following day, which was on 14th January 2009. While at the station, he also filed a restraining order against Tiana. However, on 16th January 2009, both Tiana and James were ordered to appear before the court for a hearing, and the judge issued a 6-month restraining order on both parties. Over the next couple of weeks, James continued calling, texting and emailing Tiana, so she went back to the police station multiple times asking for help, but each time she went, the police would always tell her that the messages were not threats, therefore there was nothing they could do. And because both James and Tiana had restraining orders, the officers didn't really know who the aggressor was. As time went by, the situation worsened, and Tiana began receiving nasty and threatening email messages from a woman known as Jessica Banderas. The emails read, "Trust me, baby girl, you're going to lose everything. As God is my witness. Punishment is on the way, so be prepared. You will have bad luck, you hear me? Remember this email when karma bites you in the ass." Jessica claimed to be James' ex-girlfriend, but upon further analysis, Tiana realized that Jessica was non-existent and that it was James himself who was disguising himself as Jessica. So Tiana again went to the police station and reported that her life was in danger. She showed them the messages. Unfortunately, again, the police told her that those messages were not threatening and there was nothing they could do. By that time, Tiana had visited different police stations 33 times in 6 weeks, but she didn't find any help. James began sitting outside Tiana's apartment and he followed her everywhere she went. That was when she went shopping, whenever she was to and fro her workplace, and whenever she was with her friends. Tiana was so afraid, and the fact that the police were doing nothing only made it worse. James also decided to retaliate so that the police wouldn't take Tiana's claims seriously. So on January 31st, 2009, James went to the Bloomfield police station with a printed letter. The letter had a picture of Tiana on it and also her phone number. The content of the letter said that Tiana still loved James and she wanted to talk to him. James told the police that Tiana sent him that letter, and therefore she had broken the restraining order, which barred her from contacting him. So the police contacted Tiana about the letter. However, she strongly denied ever sending any letter to James. She also added that she had never seen it before. Tiana told the police that she was the one who was being harassed by James and she wanted nothing to do with him. The officer thought it was weird for someone to send a photo of themselves to their ex and then have their name written on it as if they wouldn't recognize them. So he took the letter and sent it to a lab to see if he could get fingerprints lifted. Tiana started communicating with Robert Dennis, who was her former college sweetheart. The two reconciled, and they decided to get married, and Robert planned to propose to her officially on Valentine's Day. Unfortunately, James found out about their reunion, and he was furious and jealous. Therefore, he continued harassing her. On the 7th February 2009, James went to Tiana's apartment and slashed 4 of her car tires at her driveway. Tiana was so terrified after she discovered that her car tires had been slashed, she believed that it was James who did it, even though she had no evidence. Once again, she went to Plainville police station to report the incident, but she was told that there was no way they could prove it was James who did it. Tiana told her father Alvin about what happened, and they came up with a plan of how to get the evidence. So Tiana's father installed a surveillance camera outside of her apartment facing her driveway so that they can catch James if he tried to harm Tiana. With evidence in hand, they would be able to prove that James had violated the restraining order and he would be arrested. Tiana was so afraid for her life at this point. Therefore, her father spent 4 hours together with her, teaching her how to defend herself in case James attacks her. On 13th February 2009, while Tiana was working at Post University in Waterbury as an admission counselor, she received many calls from James. While talking over the phone with him, Tiana's coworker witnessed how James was harassing her over the phone. So Tiana called Plainville police, but they advised her to contact the Waterbury, Connecticut police instead, since that is the community where she worked at. When she arrived at that station after work, the officers informed her that they had trouble accepting the validity of the restraining order that she had brought. Therefore, they didn't believe it was real. They instructed her to get a copy by fax from the Plainville police. Tiana did as they said, and at 3 p.m., she came back with a copy by fax and a written statement from her coworker who had overheard her conversation with James. She gave them to the police. Unfortunately, the officers told her that they were short-staffed, and so they dismissed her. Tiana felt completely helpless because no officer was taking her seriously. Therefore, she was in tears. She was in her car crying hysterically. She called her mother and told her, "Mom, you wouldn't believe these people. They treated me like dirt. They didn't believe anything I told them. They thought I was lying, and one officer accused me of having a fake restraining order." When her mother heard this, she spoke with the sergeant, but the sergeant assured her that nothing would happen to her daughter. He snarled at her, and Tiana's mother told him that she doesn't want her daughter to become a statistic. She told the sergeant that if something happens to her daughter, he better move to another planet. The following day, when Tiana came back home at approximately 7:20 p.m., she found a handwritten note left at her door. The note read, "Tiana, forgive me, I never cheated on you." She believed that it was James who left the not-so-string. She hurriedly went to check the surveillance footage to confirm if it was him. Unfortunately, the surveillance camera's tape had run out of memory, so it didn't record anything that day. She didn't have any evidence that it was James who left the note at her door. But still, she took the note to the police station and told them that she believes it was James who left the note at her door. They decided to look into her claims this time round. So they called James to come in and provide a handwriting sample, and he denied sending the note. James became infuriated with Tiana for reporting him to the police. Later on, Tiana went with her friend Anna to the store, and they got a tape with the longest recording time, and she put it in her surveillance camera. On the 14th February 2009, which was on a Valentine's Day, Tiana checked her email box. She discovered that once again, James had sent her several emails begging her to speak to him and call her, and he pleaded with her not to tell the police about the mails since he had a restraining order. But Tiana went to Plainville police and reported him. The police assured her that James had violated the terms of the restraining order and they were going to arrest him. Tiana left the police station feeling that the weight had finally been lifted of her shoulder. Unfortunately, instead of the police going to arrest James, they called him and informed him about the recent emails that he had sent to Tiana. They told him that if they confirm that he actually sent those emails to Tiana, then they are going to arrest him. James knew that Tiana had went to the police station and told them about the emails, something which he had warned her earlier not to do. He was filled with rage, and so he planned to kill her. Meanwhile, Tiana informed her parents that she went to the police station with evidence, and this time round the police would be arresting James. Her father was relieved. However, he warned her not to return to her apartment until James gets arrested. On the other hand, her mother invited her to spend the weekend at her place. Tiana didn't listen to her father's advice. She decided to go back to her apartment to park some of belongings. Meanwhile, James drove to Tiana's apartment and found out that she was not yet at her apartment, so he tried to hire some locksmiths to help him break into Tiana's apartment. Unfortunately, they refused to do his dirty job, so he had no option but to hide close to Tiana's apartment, but where he could not be detected, he wanted to see her as she returns home. That evening, Tiana returned to her apartment so that she can pack her suitcase. Unfortunately, as she got to her front door, James stepped out of the shadows and pulled out a knife. He stabbed her 20 times, twice directly in the heart. James then drove away from the crime scene. Tiana was badly injured and she was barely hanging on. She was, however, able to call 911 at 9:41 p.m. She told 911 operator that, "I'm bleeding to death. My ex-boyfriend just stabbed me to death." Her voice was fading away, and soon she lost consciousness. Neighbors who had heard her scream saw James speeding away from the crime scene in his PT Cruiser car. They quickly ran to her apartment to help her. Soon an ambulance arrived and found Tiana unresponsive in a pool of her own blood on the back deck of her apartment. They rushed her to Hartford Hospital. The doctors tried all they could to revive her, but her injuries were too severe and she had lost a lot of blood, so she died at 11:41 p.m. James was on the run with Tiana's blood still on his shirt, so he called his brother Brandon and confessed to him what he had done. That night, Tiana's parents were called, and they went to the hospital to see their daughter. They were so devastated to see the corpse of their daughter. They informed the police that James had murdered their daughter, and immediately the police began looking for James Carter. Fortunately, early the following morning, they were able to track him down and arrested him. He was charged with Tiana's murder, harassment, and violating the restraining order. He was held on a $2 million bond, but it was eventually increased to $3 million. While he was in jail, he wrote letters to relatives and other friends boasting about what he did to Tiana and using degrading language, calling her a bitch and saying he didn't regret what he did to her. He even insulted Tiana's family and wrote that they must be taught a lesson. In October 2011, James' trial began. There was a mountain of evidences against him. He was seen on the surveillance camera that Tiana's dad had installed. Tiana had also identified him before she died, and James' brother, Brandon, and his girlfriend also testified that James confessed to them that he stabbed Tiana that night. Tiana's father also read to the jury a poem called Chapter Close. The poem was written by Tiana before she died, and it was about her leaving James. And it talked about being released from his abuse, anger, temper, torture, control, jealousy, insecurity, his threats, his ego, and everything. Surprisingly, while in court, James denied killing Tiana. As the trial proceeded, James didn't have any remorse for killing Tiana, and he couldn't even stand in the courtroom to hear his trial. So he stood up and interrupted the trial. He told the court that he can't be there to listen to the trial, so they took him out of the courtroom and locked him in a separate room. His defense team argued that he was suffering from mental health problems, therefore he should be charged with manslaughter. However, the jury found James Carter guilty of killing Tiana and sentenced him to 60 years in prison without the possibility of parole. He would also serve a subsequent 5-year sentence for violating the restraining order. On January of 2011, Alvin filed a wrongful death lawsuit against Plainville, Waterbury, and Bloomfield police departments. The suit alleged that despite Tiana's pleas for help and the knowledge of the situation, police officers failed to arrest James Carter for violating the restraining order despite their awareness of the problem. In April of 2014, officers with the Waterbury Police Department and the Plainville Police Department were found guilty of negligence by a jury in regards to their handling of Tiana's case. And as a result of this, Tiana's family received a settlement of $10 million for the damages. Tiana's family were determined to fight domestic violence in honor of their daughter, so they established Tiana Notice Foundation to push Connecticut to tighten up the laws surrounding domestic violence in order to prevent future murders. They also started a GPS monitoring program where a GPS is put in place for high-risk abusers, which will alert the victims that their offender is nearing them and give the victims of domestic violence time to act.